Substack, Twitter stuff. This was what was really hot. It's really what I wanted to talk about anyway. It's got me kind of upset and fired up to the point where I actually wrote an article. So I wanted to first off talk about Matt Taibbi for a second. So Matt, it's literally one slide. I was able to. He published something to his Substack last night, saying that earlier this afternoon that he learned the Substack links are being locked on Twitter. Since being able to share his articles is the primary reason that he uses Twitter, he was alarmed and asked what's going on. And it turns out Twitter is upset about a new notes feature, which they see as a hostile rival. And when I asked how I was supposed to market my work, I was given the opportunity of posting my articles on Twitter instead of Substack, except that it doesn't allow you the same publishing format. So it's not a one-to-one thing. Not much suspense there. I'm staying at Substack. So you've all been great to me, as is management of the company. Beginning early next week, I'll be using the new Substack notes feature, to which you'll have access, which is cool. We'll have access to that instead of Twitter, a decision that apparently will come at a price as far as any future Twitter files reports are concerned. Not just that, but Elon Musk actually unfollowed him on Twitter, which, believe it or not, so petty. It was absolutely worth it, and I'll always be grateful to those who gave me the chance to work on that story. But man, is this a crazy planet. So that's kind of what shook out a little bit, but I got really I've been following this for a while. And so I wanted to write an article about it, and let me switch the slideshow off and go back to the main. And now here we go. Here's the article that I wrote. So it's Substack versus Twitter. Poking bears actually has consequences. This is not about Matt Taibbi or the Twitter files. All right. Now, this coincided with Matt Taibbi going on Mehdi Hasan and having an explosive interview where Mehdi Hasan effectively attacked everything that he wrote in the Twitter files by pointing out a couple of minor date changes, and there were inconsistencies and incorrect things toward which Taibbi admitted, yes, that was incorrect. But those were minor, and they don't dismiss the entirety of what the Twitter files were and the collusion between government and private business that it exposed. But they were certainly mistakes that he acknowledged and owned up to. And Mehdi was looking for the gotcha, and he got it from corporate media. But more importantly was what Substack, the war that broke out between Substack and Twitter. And that's what I wanted to talk about, which is that Twitter decided to respond after Substack has been trying to take Twitter's users for months. And I've seen this. I've been like, ooh, it's a little cringy. So I said, this is a tough one to write. I love what Substack has been doing the past 2 years, and it's why we're here and why we advocate for most content creators to take advantage of the power of Substack. I actually started a tech tips channel, and one of the things that it focuses on is Substack and why you should use it. That's what that link goes to. But we now have to look objectively at why Twitter is restricting access to people linking to their published Substack articles, even putting up warning screens like below if a URL shortener is used. I'm going to show you that in a second. And this was Matt's tweet that already has over 1 million views from the other day. Okay, where he said that was talking about notes, Substack notes. What is Substack notes? I said, I disagree with Twitter's decision to personally, right?
And so I don't mean to cut you off. And again, just reiterate one more time. Elon Musk chose to no longer follow Matt Taibbi on Twitter.
Correct. He unfollowed Taibbi. That's right. It was petty. All right. He got upset because, what Taibbi did was he said, I'm going to now leave Twitter and I'm only going to publish on Substack. And I'm going to use their notes feature, and now I'm going to be the guinea pig. Not only did Elon poke that bear, but now he's got one of these major Substack contributors that has a huge following embracing the notes feature where he might not have even paid attention to it before. It was so dumb on Elon's part, in my estimation. This was, by the way that they were censoring. This was a link to Substack, to our Substack, to the article, and they put this go back to the previous page.
It may be unsafe.
The button actually drives you back to Twitter, and you actually have to click this continue link to actually go forward and see the Substack. The whole idea is to push you back and to not link you to my website and to my article. And I said, this is making life difficult for both Twitter users who like to read Substack articles and Substack writers who use Twitter as the primary means to share their articles on social media. And I do. I share my articles. I share Misty's articles. I share INN articles I also share them to Instagram and to Facebook and to YouTube and to Rumble and everywhere else. I think Twitter is overestimating their value here to Substack. However, these were my conclusions, and I decided to give you a Tarantino movie where I'm going to give you the answer up front, tell you what I came up with, and then give you the timeline as to why I think they actually did this. So first of all is that Substack isn't totally without fault here. They've been going after Twitter for 6 months. They quietly declared war on Twitter in November. Quote, "The problem isn't that Elon Musk owns Twitter, it's that you don't." So right away, and this was literally like days after Elon took over Twitter, they saw what was happening in shitlib media, in corporate mainstream media, and in the independent media who had left mainstream media, freaking out about Elon's control over Twitter. And they decided they wanted to try to take some market share and grab some of these people and bring them over to Substack. On top of all of that, you've got the fact that Elon's an order taker with his military contract for SpaceX, Tesla, the Boring Company, Starlink for Ukraine. He hasn't had Twitter support going after NAFO trollbots, and he listens to the people in power in the intelligence and military that are afraid of the accurate information exposing their lies and propaganda via Substack, a la Seymour Hersh and Nord Stream, or Glenn Greenwald and Hunter Biden's laptop, right? We also know that Elon is not for free speech. He won't even comment on Julian Assange, for crying out loud. And he's been censoring left-wing voices and independent voices that challenge establishment narratives, left, right, and sideways. Scott Ritter's been on and off Twitter several times, as has Garland Nixon since Elon took over. I said, what's really interesting, and apparently I read somewhere else that Elon was trying to buy Substack and was frustrated that they didn't want to sell. But it's interesting that most of the writers that Elon picked for the Twitter files were Substack publishers. Was it to try to extricate them from the platform, or an attempt to drive a wedge between them? Only Elon knows, but it's an interesting thought. But Barry Weiss, Michael Schellenberger, Lee Fang, they all have Substacks. By the way, Lee Fang's Substack cleared out. I found that yesterday too. In the meantime, Substack has been making substantial improvements to the platform monthly over the past year. They've been transparent about what they're doing. If you go to their on.substack.com, I believe is their blog, where they have been putting their product improvements and what their changes in their roadmap every single month. They've been sharing that with all their users and anyone who wants to learn. They came out with last year iPhone and Android apps, which substantially increase user engagement. Sharing between creators increased, and it saw an overall lift in subscribers to the platform. I certainly have seen a huge lift since the iPhone app came out last March. They've added tagging, like on Facebook, writer profiles, a new web reader, tons of functionality and features. Again, I love Substack. I love what they're doing. And I will say that Twitter wasn't trying to compete with Substack. Actually, quite the opposite. First of all, they bought Review, which was a competing program, a competing newsletter program. I thought it was a pretty good deal. You could kind of drag and drop and create your own thing. But they're shelving that at the end of this year. But Substack has been going after Twitter, because in November they launched this thing called Chat, where they were hoping to have the writer create a conversation amongst their subscribers. But now there's this thing like Notes, where you don't have to subscribe, but you could. It's almost like a news feed. And if you look at this, check this out. Watch this. Here's Notes. I'm going to show you what Notes is for 1 second here. Let's.
Looks great right there.
Hold on. So what they specifically lay out, like,
there it is.
That looks a lot like a Twitter feed, doesn't it?
Very similar.
That's
well, you know,
like
literally. Well, wait a minute. Hold on. Let me explain.
Or Substack,
what I'm seeing here. Let me explain what I'm seeing here. What I'm seeing here is something that has always triggered the old guard, and that is something new to challenge the old. And that's the way the world works, especially to everyone who's involved in business. Sometimes the new will replace something old. That's just how it is. And so if Substack is doing this for its writers, for its contributors, then I say more power to it. It's a way for authors, people who run Substack, to engage with their supporters, because let's face it, some supporters want to financially support said content creators, and that is of their own free will. but let's say there's a chance to engage with your audience even more so. I think that's beneficial for said authors, for said content creators to engage with their audience, so their audience knows, like, hey, this is the person who I'm supporting. I get a chance to speak to them. I get a chance to talk to them and engage with them. Or like, hey, here's an update to something that you wrote about. You should check it out. I mean, there's a whole path here in which it can lead to more free speech. Now, the thing is, Twitter, Elon, like all businesses, do have a beginning, middle, and end. Hell, at least MySpace went out with some dignity. Tom, everybody's first true friend, just rode off into the sunset. He saw the writing in the wall. I was like, you know what? MySpace can't do this. It's time for me to leave. And we lost Tom.
Well, he sold to Fox, though. All right. So
yeah, he sold to Fox, but he rode off into the sunset.
Yes, he did. He disappeared forever.
I thought this was a free country. I thought we had free market.
So
I thought that.
This is
I didn't hear no bell.
And the guys at Substack saying that while notes may look similar to social media feeds, the key difference is what you don't see. Substack Network runs on paid subscriptions, not ads, and this changes everything. And wow, let me tell you, that really looks like a tweet, a retweet, a like, and a comment, and like it very similar. I could see why people at Twitter would be upset. By contrast, the lifeblood of a subscription network, okay, so an ad-based social network, is attention. In legacy social networks, people get rewarded for creating content that goes viral within the context of the feed, regardless of whether or not people value it, locking readers into a perpetual scroll. Almost all the attendant financial rewards then go to the owner of the platform. By contrast, the lifeblood of a subscription network is the money paid to the people who are doing worthy work within it. Here, people get rewarded for respecting the trust and attention of their audiences. The ultimate goal on this platform is to convert casual readers into paying subscribers. And in this system, the vast majority of the financial rewards go to the creators of the content. So, yeah. And this is where Restack, quote, look at that, Restack. They've been calling it cross-posting also, but now Restack is almost like a retweet, right? I mean, it's awfully similar. And I can, again, understand why people at Twitter would be upset. So, just wanted to point out why they've been going after Twitter and how, and why Twitter saw this as a direct threat. I also want to point out that API changes to Twitter were looking like it could cost Substack upwards of $100,000 a year or more.
That's
just
the
to
thing.
keep the API open to embed tweets. Right?
I've not seen anyone else talk about that. Right? And between this and what we know about Paperly recently running into similar problems, which is why Paperly is shutting down.
Yep.
Yeah,
right. It sounds like Twitter's trying to strong arm their competitors to use Twitter and pay them an exorbitant amount of money. We've also heard talk about Twitter do stuff like what brand checks, right?
Yep.
So like
gold
Nike.
That's
it.
The way I would describe this is it's simple. It's like that episode of The Simpsons where Homer created a online business, and obviously he didn't know what the hell he was doing. So he gets a knock from Bill Gates and says, "I'll buy your stuff." And it's like, "Oh, great!" And Homer's like happy, like, "Yeah, sure, you could buy it." And Bill Gates says, like, "Everybody always does that." And then they proceeded to trash everything that was in Homer's office. And it was like, "Why'd you do this?" And he says, "Just because I hate competition."
Yeah.
Yep. That's what Elon's doing. So, and it's like Silicon Valley. So, but again, $100,000 a year, they're talking about $40,000 a month for businesses potentially in an expense that they get free right now to keep that API open. And that's a tremendous value that Substack offers to their readers or to their writers to be able to quickly and easily embed a tweet. And it's great. But Substack also recently announced that they were opening an ownership model for writers to buy into owning a small piece of the platform where they contribute for as little as $100 as opposed to Musk owning Twitter. No, they're not going public. No, they're not going public.
But they're allowing for shares. You can buy shares.
It's like a co-op.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
More like a co-op. So Twitter is doing what it thinks it needs to in order to protect its business model and proprietary advantage, and it will likely backfire as it will engage fewer users than before. But I will also point out that Elon has a history of overreacting, and you've pointed this out to me several times, Reef, that he's got a history of overreacting initially, then dialing it back. Look what happened with Mastodon, and then he looks like a big hero for listening to everyone.
Yeah. Yep.
So I did put together.
I could understand overreacting. I mean, that is
here's
the thing. We are all guilty of it. All right. Look, okay. And again, I know there's a lot of people not a fan of Elon Musk, but I see that as a human reaction because we're all human. And, that's as far as I wish to go. But clearly he did overreact in regards to what Substack is doing. But he did go on the record saying that Twitter was going to be a platform for free speech. I think it puts Twitter in a bad light that Terrible. He is systematically going after Substack. Because, again, there's a lot of, journalists, commentators on the left and on the right, libertarians and socialists that use Substack, and they are on Twitter, and they have a huge Twitter following, and that Substack is still in its infancy. But by doing this, Elon Musk, you're proving yourself to be no better than the original management that was running Twitter, who were following marching orders from various government agencies to silence and suppress other free speech supporters and journalists and activists who are speaking truth to power. So, in other words, Elon, if you want to prove that you're different than these other people, the right thing to do, the correct thing to do is just, look, you overreacted. Take a step back, have a sip of tea, and
he can be a good boy, though. Yeah, he wants to be a good boy for all his masters, okay? So he's not going to do that because he's an Intel simp. But on October 26th, here's the timeline. He took over Substack, or he took over Twitter, all right? And all of corporate media goes crazy. They go to Post and Ghost and Substack and Mastodon and Medium, and they start exiting the platform and freaking out about what right-wingers and why the playing field was leveled. They were starting to get banned and suspended, and they weren't protected like they were before. So Substack sees this meltdown and makes an appeal first to publishers on October 31st, bringing your Twitter followers to Substack. Very innocent and very kind of non-confrontational, but at the same time, instructional on what you can do. Happens to be just after Elon takes over. And then we have this inflammatory about that you don't own the platform, that if you're into reading and writing, few games on the internet for more fun than Twitter at its best. This is a great article by Hamish, who is one of the co-founders of Substack. Outstanding article. But it certainly declares war on Twitter and tells them that we've got them directly in our sites, and we want to empower publishers and creators, which I'm a fan of, but I also want to be part of a community. They are one of the largest social networks, and I thought there was a way that they could potentially work together, though people point out that Elon's not exactly trustworthy, and they said that they're not obligated to do so, but I see both sides of this. When they released chat for iPhone, all right, they said it's a new space for writers and creators. This was like their first attempt to take on Twitter, and it failed. It really has not taken off the way that they had hoped. It was only available in the mobile app. Now it's available on the web as well. And it's been weird because people don't know whether to use chat or comments or where they fit in both places. But they also, the same day that they announced chat, that's when Twitter said that they were shutting down the Substack competitor. So Substack should have started to back away, in my mind, on top of the fact that when Elon picked Substack writers to publish the Twitter files, it looked like he wasn't necessarily going after them, but at the same time, he might have been going after them like a little bighorn. Like, I'm going to take all your writers and get them on board, and then I'm going to try to make a play to buy your platform. That could be too. But then,
it is also something to point out. I see your point, Indy, where you're calling out like, hey, look, I see both sides, right? But on the other hand, too, you have to look at what people are also comfortable with, what people are used to.
Yep.
And, let's just remind everyone, it wasn't too long ago where MySpace was once something that everyone liked to use until Facebook came around, and it made people, it was more easier to navigate, and it was far more, I guess, easier. And I'm kind of going off with words here, but then when it comes down to Twitter, if you look at something like Mastodon, I mean, is it really competing with Twitter? Is it that new competitor? Is Locals, is Trump's social media doing any better? I mean, Twitter is a heavyweight. It all just depends on what people like to use. And if Substack can make something that's accessible and easy for people to use and understand and be part of their lives, then okay. Because we have to remember, we are bombarded with so many social media platforms, and sometimes people are burnt down. Like, I don't have time to create another account on another platform because I just don't care.
Yep. So they expanded group chat to the web, and then Twitter announces the API access fees. Now, this was the big thing that few people really had not talked about, but they talked about different tiers, and some of the app developers for Discord and the like have talked about this. Okay, but what they're talking about, there's a free access with only write access, with write only, so you can't even read a tweet, with the ability to post 1,500 tweets a month. Basic, which is $100 a month, will let you post up to 3,000 tweets per month. That's like nothing. That's how much my account posts at the user level, or 50,000 at the app level. The read limit is 10,000 tweets per month. That's, again, minuscule. Then you get into the enterprise level, where they say it will cost upwards of 40,000 per month per reports. And they've got screen caps and what's happening. But here, various third-party tools have announced they'll be bowing out, which could see some of your favorite Twitter apps no longer working next time you log in. All right.
And that's all because that API cost how much again?
At minimum $100 a month and upwards of 40,000 a month, depending on how deep you use, how much functionality of the API and how many calls you're making per day, per week, per month is what they look at. I actually used to sell API services for the automotive industry, so I'm quite familiar with what APIs are and
there
how
goes
this works.
Like all the Discord bots are probably going to not do that anymore.
Yep, they're all starting to go.
There goes.
Yeah, here, look, Sprout Social, Hootsuite now need to assess whether the new changes will up their costs.
That probably.
If we'll see that it's worth it based upon the $9.99 per month that they're getting subscription fee per account. And then they have advanced ones. But it's really important, API access tiers to be deprecated over the next. This could be also something that they pull back in time. But it's going to hurt a lot of people, and it's going to put a lot of people out of work too. But while shutting these apps down, these are companies, these are salaries, these are developers that are being paid and working off of this stuff
Jobs.
Now. Yep.
Yeah.
So on April 5th, Substack announces notes. Okay. And then the next morning, somebody posts, this guy, Theo, if you're wondering why Substack's being suppressed, it's most likely due to them announcing notes, which is a Twitter-esque feed-like thing, which is I showed you. Right. So that was, and then here's Chris Best. He's one of the founders, where he's reporting that Twitter was throttling links. Right. There's Hamish McKenzie. You can follow him. Chris Best is another one of the subscribers.
Outstanding support. Hey, listen, folks, a lot of people in independent media are on Substack. There's a lot of stuff I want to be doing too, and hopefully I can be able to set up my own Substack too. More on that later. There's a lot of stuff that I'm working on, but I'll talk to you about all that later on too. But there we go. It is what it is.
So that was really the whole article that I wrote out, and I have a lot more. I had not, I didn't want to tell you that was already kind of long in itself, and I just thought it would get lost. But I was trying to explain more in plain language rather than giving a timeline. But I was like, you know what? Let me just put the timeline out there, start that. But it was more like, look, I use Twitter for certain things, right? To engage with people, gauge public sentiment, depth of knowledge about a story, or to fight with corporate stooges that are purveying such narratives. And many journalists and government officials have active accounts on Twitter. And instant publishing allows for real-time reporting like nothing else that's existed before. We're also fighting with fanboys and girls that get confirmation bias by watching MSDHS and Fixed News and others. And Twitter allows any random everyday worker to message a powerful or famous person with the very real potential opportunity that your message is going to get seen or heard, maybe even responded to. I personally get more out of the
what they're really upset about.
Yep, DMs.
And
group DMs.
Yeah. I agree.
That has the biggest value to me on Twitter. More than the news feed, and which is clogged with sponsored posts, my private DMs and group DMs, that's where 3/4 of my Twitter time is spent. But since Elon bought Twitter and took over, there have definitely been changes to which users were getting messed with, and the corporate media personalities friendly to establishment corporate uniparty, which is comprised of both Democrats and Republicans, started to experience what those who've been challenging narratives for years have been going through. So I started to write this up. I'm like, this is just going to become this epic thing, because you also have to take into account Taibbi testifying in front of Congress and the backdrop of corporate media going after Matt Taibbi and going after Substack writers in general. That's the thing I was
going to bring up.
Yeah.
That with like really Mehdi Hasan talked to Elon and told him their like spell check and grammar check on Substack isn't good enough. So, you know,
look, Mehdi Hasan is the same guy who gave a lackluster defense of Julian Assange, saying, you don't have to like him. You don't have to like Julian Assange. But, you know, it's kind of bad what's happening to him. But doesn't go into detail about who he truly is and what's happening to Julian Assange. So Mehdi Hasan, he's there with the establishment, BS, DNC. And unfortunately, you know, we see so many people who were cheering at the fact that he was facing off against Matt Taibbi, and there were people saying, yes, corporate media, you vindicated my life again. You have told me things that I want to hear, that all these people are just bad people. When in fact, no one's looking into the real story of the Twitter files, and that is, holy cow, there's a lot of censorship happening on Twitter, but also the same thing was happening on Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg admitted that on Joe Rogan's show. So all that stuff happening on Twitter was also happening on Facebook.
Yep.
Is anyone going to talk about that?
Amen. Oh, dude, it was so much worse. And they've cut that. They shut down groups with tens of thousands of members with no warning, no nothing. I mean, I've heard all kinds of nightmare stories, but